You click because you already feel it. You walk onto a forecourt in Britain today, you look at the sticker on a plain, ordinary family car, and your stomach drops. 40,000 pounds. For a car. Not a luxury, not a dream, just a way to get to work. And some quiet voice inside you asks the question nobody in the showroom wants you to ask out loud. When did this become impossible? Here is what I found, and it changes everything. The new car has not simply become expensive, it has become a trap dressed as a purchase. And the people who kept their cars running for 20 years knew something we were made to forget. There is a forgotten way of owning a vehicle that costs a fraction of what you are paying now, and it was ordinary common sense within living memory. I found the thread of it inside a worn 1934 motoring handbook I picked up in a box of damp paper at a village sale. The kind of book that assumed you, the owner, were the mechanic. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why the collapse started, who profited from your not knowing, and the simple habits that let ordinary people outlast every price rise ever thrown at them. And you can start this weekend with the car already sitting on your drive. Let me lay the pieces on the table, because this is a mystery, and it solves cleanly once you see the first clue. Start with a number that should not be possible. In the year 2006, the average price of a new car in the United Kingdom was a little under £15,000. Today, the average sits above £40,000 for a new vehicle once you count the popular models people actually buy. Wages did not triple. The roads did not get 3 times better. So where did that money go? And why did almost nobody stand up and refuse? Because we stopped buying cars. We started renting them, and we were taught to call it owning. Think about how the person next to you got their car. They did not save and buy it. They signed a monthly agreement, a personal contract purchase, and they pay a sum every single month, and at the end of 3 or 4 years they hand the car back and sign again. They never own anything. They are on a treadmill, and the treadmill never stops, and every few years the payment climbs a little higher, and they simply accept it because everyone around them is on the same treadmill. In 1994, roughly half of new cars in Britain were bought outright with money. Today, by the figures from the finance industry itself, around 9 in every 10 private new cars are bought on finance. That is the collapse, and it happened so quietly that most people cannot tell you the year it turned. It was not a crash you saw on the news. It was a slow swap ownership, traded for subscription, and the keys traded for a lifetime of monthly payments. But here is the part that made me put the kettle on and sit down properly. The car itself did not need to become disposable. That was a choice. And the proof is sitting in that 1934 handbook, and in the habits of a generation who would find our situation absurd. Because the people who owned cars in the middle of the last century expected them to last, and they expected to fix them, and they did both with tools that cost less than one of your monthly payments today. Let me show you what they knew. Open that old handbook, and the first thing that strikes you is the tone. It does not talk to you like a customer. It talks to you like the owner and the operator and the mechanic all the same person. It tells you to expect the car to run for 200,000 miles and more if you simply do a short list of small things on time. It gives you the schedule. It assumes you have hands. And the schedule is almost laughably simple. Change the oil before it turns black and thin. Keep the cooling system clean. Keep the moving joints greased. Keep the tires at the right pressure. Listen to the engine and act on small noises before they become big ones. That is most of it. That is the secret that built cars which outlive their owners. Now here is the paradox that should make you angry, and I want you to sit with it. Modern cars are built to far tighter tolerances than anything from 1934. The metal is better. The oil is better. The engineering is better. By every measure, a car built today should be capable of lasting longer than a car built 90 years ago. And yet the average car in Britain is scrapped at around 14 years old, and huge numbers are handed back or written off far sooner. We have better machines and shorter lives for them. Why? Because somewhere between then and now, the knowledge was pulled out of your hands, and the moment it left your hands, the cost went into someone else's pocket. This is where the story turns, and I want to name it plainly, because you have earned the truth by staying with me this far. The car did not get more expensive by accident. An entire industry was rebuilt around the idea that you should never touch your own vehicle, never understand it, and never keep it long enough to stop paying for it. Think about the small things first, because the small things reveal the whole game. There was a time when opening the bonnet of your car and topping up a fluid was as normal as filling a kettle. Now, open the bonnet of many new cars and you find a plastic cover sealed over the engine with a note telling you to see an authorized dealer. They physically covered the engine so you would stop looking at it. That is not safety. That is a message. This is not yours to understand. And the servicing followed the same path. In the old handbook, a service is a list of jobs you can read and understand and mostly do yourself. Today, a service is a mystery performed behind a counter, priced at whatever they decide, tied to a digital record that the manufacturer controls, and quietly required to protect a warranty that they wrote to their own advantage. The knowledge moved from your kitchen table into their computer, and the price moved with it. But the deepest trick, the one that took me longest to see, is the way they changed what a car is for. A car used to be a tool you owned. Now it is sold to you as an identity you rent. The adverts do not talk about how many miles the engine will last or how cheaply you can keep it running. They talk about who you become when you are seen in it. And an identity, unlike a tool, has no natural stopping point. You can always be sold a newer one. You can always be made to feel behind. That feeling is the engine of the whole machine, and it runs on your insecurity, not on petrol. So the collapse is real, but now you can see what actually collapsed. It was not the car. It was our knowledge of how to keep one. The single most valuable habit from that old world, the one that quietly saved fortunes, was learning to read a used car the way a farmer reads a horse. The people who bought wisely almost never bought new. They bought a good, boring, well-made car a few years old after someone else had swallowed the worst of the loss, and they ran it into the ground with care. Here is the number that ought to be printed on every showroom wall. A new car in Britain loses somewhere between 40 and 50% of its value in the first 3 years. Say that slowly, 40 to 50%. On a 40,000-pound car, that is up to 20,000 pounds of your money gone, evaporated, before the car is even middle-aged. You did not crash it. You did not wear it out. It simply stopped being new, and being new was the only thing you actually paid the premium for. So the forgotten method begins with a single decision. Let someone else pay the tax of newness. Buy the car when it is 3 years old, mechanically sound, with the worst of the loss already absorbed by the first owner. You are not buying a worse car. In many cases, you are buying the exact same car, only sane. But, and this is the hinge that swings the whole door open, buying used only works if you can tell a good one from a bad one. And that is precisely the skill they stopped teaching, because a public that cannot judge a used car is a public that runs frightened back to the showroom and the monthly payment. So let me give you the eyes for it. When you stand in front of a used car, the old hands had a sequence, and it still works perfectly on modern vehicles. First, you look at it cold. Always insist on seeing the car before the engine has been run, because a warm engine hides 100 sins. A seller who has warmed it up for you may be kind, or may be hiding a hard, cold start. You want to hear the truth of that first turn of the key. Second, you read the fluids like a doctor reads blood. Pull the oil dipstick and look. Clean amber or light brown? Good. A creamy, milky texture? Walk away, because that is coolant mixing where it should never be. Look at the coolant itself in the tank. It should be a clear, bright color, not brown, not with an oily film floating on top. These are 2-minute checks, and they can save you thousands. Third, you look under the car and on the ground where it was parked. Fresh oil stains, wet patches, drips every one is a conversation about money. A clean, dry underside on an older car tells you the owner cared. Fourth, and this is the one people forget, you look at the tires across their width. If a tire is worn more on one edge than the other, the car may have a suspension or alignment fault that the seller is quietly hoping you will inherit. Tires tell you how the car has been treated far more honestly than any smiling owner will. None of that requires a tool. None of it requires an expert. It requires only that you slow down and look, which is exactly the thing the fast, shiny, finance-driven world has trained us not to do. And knowledge, unlike a 40,000-pound price tag, can be recovered. If you want to go deeper into exactly how this recovery works, the full sequence of habits, the buying method, and the long-term system for keeping a car running on almost nothing, I put the complete framework into a series of digital books called First Fixes, Deep Habits, and System Complete. They are the kitchen table handbook rebuilt for today, written for the person who suspects the most useful knowledge is exactly what stopped being taught. You will find the details in the description below. Now let me hand you the first piece you can use, because I promised you this would be practical, and a promise without a method is just noise. Now I can already hear the objection, and it is a fair one, so let me answer it before it grows. Someone watching this is thinking, that is fine for people with a driveway and time and a bit of money set aside, but I do not have any of that. I am stretched thin already. This part is especially for you because the oldest knowledge was born out of having less, not more, and it works best when money is tight, not when it is loose. Here is something you can do this very weekend, on the car you already own, with nothing but a cloth and 10 minutes, that quietly adds years to its life and pounds to your pocket. Check your tire pressures and set them correctly. That is it. It sounds too small to matter. It is one of the biggest levers you have. A tire that is underinflated by even a modest amount drags on the road, which burns more fuel on every single journey, wears the tire out faster, and makes the car work harder than it should. Studies from motoring organizations have put the fuel waste from soft tires at several percent money leaking out of your tank on every trip, week after week, year after year. You are paying for that leak right now, today, and the fix is free at any garage, forecourt, airline, or a few pounds for a little gauge you keep in the door. The correct number for your car is printed inside the driver's door frame or the fuel flap. Match it. That is a forgotten habit that pays you back every mile. And while you are there, one more free thing. Check your oil the old way with the dipstick once a month. An engine that runs low on oil is an engine dying quietly, and by the time the warning light comes on, damage may already be done. A car that never runs short of clean oil can outlive 2 or 3 cars that were neglected. That check costs you nothing but 2 minutes and the willingness to look. The people in that old handbook did it without thinking, because to them the alternative, a ruined engine and a huge bill, was unthinkable. Do you feel the shift? None of this needs a driveway. None of this needs money. It needs the habit that was taken from us, the habit of tending a machine instead of merely paying for it. But here is where it gets deeper, because tires and oil keep a car alive, and staying alive is only half the battle. The other half is refusing the treadmill in the first place. And to do that, you need to understand the trap well enough to step around it. So let me open the finance trick all the way up, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The monthly payment world survives on one simple confusion. It gets you to stop thinking about the total price of the car and start thinking only about the monthly number. As long as the monthly number feels bearable, you will agree to almost any total. That is the whole magic trick. 250 pounds a month sounds fine, nobody adds it up out loud. But run it across a few years and roll it into the next agreement and the next, and you discover you have paid the price of the car 2 or 3 times over, and you still own nothing at the end. You have been a permanent tenant of a machine you could have owned outright. The people who beat this were not richer than you. They were simply harder to fool. They asked one question that the whole system is designed to make you forget. Not how much a month, but how much in total, and what do I own when it ends? Ask those 2 questions in any showroom and watch the conversation change, because those are the questions the treadmill cannot survive. Therefore, the escape is not complicated, though it is not easy, and I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. The escape is to buy a sound used car with money you have saved, or with the smallest, shortest, plainest loan you can manage, and then to keep it alive with your own hands for far longer than they ever wanted you to. Break the cycle once, and you never rejoin it. The first jump is the hard one. Every year after that, you are the person on the street with no car payment, and you will feel like you found a secret door, because you did. And now let me give you the piece I have been holding back, the one that made all of this click into place for me, the finale that turns a defensive strategy into something almost joyful. When I went looking for how ordinary families ran cars for decades on almost nothing, I kept finding references to something the wartime and post-war governments actively taught the public, the discipline of preventive maintenance. During the Second World War, when Britain could not simply replace worn-out vehicles because the factories were building for the war and petrol and rubber were rationed, keeping every existing vehicle running became a matter of national survival, and the guidance that came out of that period is astonishing because it treats the ordinary driver as fully capable of extending a vehicle's life almost indefinitely. The core of it was written in the language of thrift, and it came down to one principle that the old manuals repeat again and again. It is always cheaper to prevent wear than to repair it. Every noise attended to early, every fluid kept clean, every joint kept greased, was framed not as a chore but as a saving, and they could tell you roughly how many times over the cost came back to you. A shilling of grease saved a pound of repair. A clean oil change saved an engine. They kept the arithmetic in front of people, and the arithmetic made thrift feel like winning. But here is the specific, buried piece I promised you at the start, the thing that almost nobody talks about today. Those wartime and pre-war guides were obsessed with a single overlooked enemy that quietly kills more cars than any dramatic breakdown ever will. Not crashes, not engine failure, standing still in moisture. They understood that a car does most of its dying while it is parked, from rust and from the slow corrosion of a machine that sits unused and damp, and their remedy was almost absurdly simple and completely free. Use the car, warm it fully, and keep it dry. They knew that a car driven regularly and brought up to a proper operating temperature drives the moisture out of its own oil and its own exhaust system, where damp is constantly forming and quietly eating the metal from the inside. A car that only ever does short, cold trips never gets hot enough to burn that moisture off, and it rots from within while looking perfectly fine on the outside. The wartime advice, echoed in that 1934 handbook, was to give a working car a proper run at full temperature regularly, to let the engine reach the heat that dries it out, and to store it somewhere with air moving through, not sealed up wet. That single understanding that heat and airflow are free, rust protection, kept fleets of vehicles alive through years when not a single new one could be had. Think about what that means for you now. The most expensive thing that happens to your car may be the damp it sits in and the short, cold trips that never let it dry, and the fix costs nothing. Take the longer route home now and then and let the engine truly warm. Park where air can move. Wipe the moisture from where it gathers. You are doing what a nation at war did to make vehicles outlast a rationing that would have crippled anyone who bought the story that machines are disposable. That is the whole secret, laid out on the table. The collapse in car affordability is real, but it was never really about the cars. It was about the quiet removal of a body of knowledge how to buy a machine wisely, how to read it, how to keep it alive, how to refuse the treadmill of endless payments and the replacement of that knowledge with a monthly number and a sealed plastic cover over an engine you were told not to understand. The people who came before us were not richer. In most ways they had far less. But they owned their machines outright, they understood them, and they kept them running for a fraction of what we now hand over, because the knowledge lived in their hands and their kitchen table handbooks instead of behind a dealer's counter. That knowledge was never destroyed, it was only misplaced, and you have just picked it back up. So here is what you actually recovered today. Not a trick, a stance. The quiet, steady confidence of the person who owns the thing they drive, understands it, tends it, and cannot be marched onto the treadmill no matter how shiny the advert. That was taken from us slowly and sold back to us as convenience, and it was one of the most expensive things we ever let slip through our fingers. If you are the kind of person who suspects that the most useful knowledge is exactly the knowledge that stopped being taught because someone profits every time you feel helpless, then you already belong here, among the people quietly picking these methods back up, one by one. Now I want to hear from you, and be specific because I read these. Tell me the age of the oldest car you have ever kept running and how many years you managed to hold on to it before you let it go. And tell me where in the world you are watching from, because I am always amazed at how far these old habits traveled and how many places kept them alive. Leave it in a comment. This audience is quiet by nature, but your one comment helps someone else find their way off the treadmill too. And if this landed, stay with me and join the people recovering this lost practical knowledge one method at a time. Because the next thing I am opening from the archive is the forgotten way people used to make a set of tires last nearly twice as long. A simple rotation and reading method from the same era that the fast replacement world desperately hopes you never learn. I found it in the margins of that same worn handbook, written in pencil by a hand that clearly knew exactly what it cost to be fooled. I will lay it all out for you next. If you're still with me, you and I clearly think the same way. So let me tell you where this goes next. Inside the Old Ways Society, I walk you through the full handbook maintenance schedule, step by step. You can ask me your own questions there, and I answer you myself. Belong among thousands of Old Ways folks like you. Just point your phone at the code on screen, and you can cancel anytime.